You're standing in the parking lot of Whitmore Elementary at 6:40 on a Friday morning in May, holding a box of cupcakes for the third grade bake sale when Brooke pulls in next to you in a leased G-Wagon the color of wet concrete. She's the new art teacher. She's been at the school 4 months. The lease is $1, $240 a month, and she told you that number herself, unprompted, in the copy room, the way people tell you things they want you to ask more questions about. You drive a 2014 Corolla with a duct-taped side mirror. You teach third grade. You make $58,000 a year. You also own the laundromat on Ferris Street, the one with the flickering blue sign, free and clear, no mortgage, and it puts $4,300 a month into your checking account whether you show up or not. Brooke doesn't know that. Nobody at this school knows that. You've made sure of it. This isn't a story about hiding money. It's a story about what you're willing to look like on the way to having it. It starts 9 years earlier, the week you turn 26, in a hospital waiting room that smells like hand sanitizer and old coffee. Your father slipped on ice outside his mechanic shop and broke his hip in a way that ended his working life 2 years early. The settlement check, when it finally comes 8 months later, is $71,000. Not life-changing money, not headline money, but more cash than you've ever held in your name at once. Your mother has opinions before the check even clears. She wants you to put it toward a down payment on a house in Cedarbrook, the neighborhood she's been circling in the newspaper for a decade, the one with the good schools and the manicured medians. A house says something about a person. She tells you over Sunday dinner, passing the green beans like she hasn't just handed you a life plan. You nod. You don't argue. You also don't do it. Instead, on a Tuesday afternoon, that means nothing to anyone but you. You drive past a shuttered coin laundry on Ferris Street with a for sale sign taped inside the window, going crooked in the wind. The building is ugly. Cinder block, flat roof, a parking lot with weeds pushing through the cracks. The asking price is $64,000 for the building, and the 22 machines already bolted to the floor inside, most of them still working. You don't know anything about laundromats. You know that the numbers on the seller's handwritten ledger, when you finally get a look at them, show something you can't stop thinking about. The machines took in $3,100 last month, and the only real expenses were water, electric, and a part-time attendant for 6 hours a week. No rent, because you'd own the building. No lease, no loan, if you paid cash. You do the math 4 different ways that night at your kitchen table, the same table where you'll do this math for years afterward. A house in Cedarbrook would cost you money every month for 30 years before it ever gave anything back. This building, ugly as it is, would start paying you back in month 1. You buy the laundromat. You tell your mother it's an investment property. You do not clarify what kind. The first year is not romantic. You're grading spelling tests at your kitchen table with laundromat paperwork stacked next to them. You learn what a coin drop mechanism is because one breaks in October and the repair guy charges you $180 to fix something you later learn to fix yourself with an $11 part. You learn to read a water bill the way you once learned to read a report card. You learn that Tuesdays and Sundays are the busiest days and Wednesdays might as well not exist. Your friend Denise, who teaches 4th grade down the hall, asks once why you always smell faintly like dryer sheets on Saturdays. You tell her you do laundry for your dad since the accident. It isn't technically a lie. You just leave out the part where you're also counting quarters into paper rolls in the back office afterward. By the second year, the laundromat is clearing $2,600 a month after every expense, including the 12-year-old furnace you finally replaced. You don't touch a dollar of it. You feed it back into the building. New machines, 4 of them, the kind that take cards instead of just coins, because you've noticed the college kids from the community center 3 blocks over hate carrying change. Revenue climbs to $3,400 a month. You still haven't told your mother the truth. That October, your coworker Trevor leases a Dodge Charger, black on black, and parks it in the same row you park the Corolla in every morning. He's not reckless. He's 29, no kids, decent salary, and the car makes him happy pulling into the lot. You don't judge him for it. You just notice, the way you're starting to notice things, that his payment is $510 a month and yours, on the building, was a one-time $64,000 and done. If you've made it this far into the story, go ahead and subscribe now, because the part where the numbers actually start moving is coming up next, and you don't want to miss where this goes. Comment quarters if you're still with me. At 29, your mother finds out. Not from you, from your cousin's wedding, of all places, when your uncle, who does the books for a few small businesses in town, mentions offhand that the property on Ferris Street has been quietly turning into something. Your mother pulls you into the church parking lot in her good dress and asks you, flatly, if you own a laundromat instead of a house. You say yes. She's quiet for longer than you expect. Then she says the thing that actually stings, not out of cruelty, but honesty. I wanted people to look at you and see that you'd made it. You tell her, as gently as you can manage in a church parking lot in heels, that you didn't buy a building so people could look at it. You bought it so you'd never have to explain yourself to anyone again about money, including her. She doesn't fully accept that answer that day. It takes her another year and a plumbing emergency at her own house that she has to put on a credit card before she starts asking you real questions about how the laundromat actually works instead of just what it says about you. By 31, you add a second location, a rundown spot 2 towns over that a divorcing couple wants gone fast. You pay $58,000 cash again, this time from money the first laundromat generated on its own, not from savings, not from a loan. Something shifts here that's hard to explain to people who haven't watched it happen. For the first 2 years, you were the only engine. Now the first building is buying the second one, and neither location needs you standing in it to keep working. Combined, the 2 locations clear $7,100 a month. Your teaching salary that year is $64,000. The laundromats, running your off hours and weekends, make almost as much as your full-time job, and they don't require a single parent-teacher conference. Trevor, still at the school, still driving nice cars. The Charger's been traded twice now. Asks you one Friday how you always seem so unbothered about money. You don't have a clean answer for him either. Explaining 9 years of coin rolls and card readers, and a mother who needed a wedding to find out the truth isn't a break room conversation. At 33, a loan officer named Gary calls you out of nowhere. He'd noticed the 2 properties on a public filing while working on someone else's application and tracked down your number through the county records, which feels invasive until he explains why. A third building just came up for auction, a shuttered dry cleaner 2 blocks from your first location, and he thinks you're exactly the kind of buyer the bank wants to lend to now because you have 2 profitable properties and almost no debt. You sit in his office on a Tuesday during your lunch break, still wearing your lanyard from school, and listen to him explain a number that used to intimidate you and now just sounds like a tool. He offers you $90,000 at a rate low enough that the laundromat's own cash flow could cover the payment twice over. For the first time, you consider using debt on purpose. Not because you need to, but because the math says it multiplies faster than waiting to save the cash yourself. You take 3 days to decide. You run the numbers the way you always do, at the kitchen table, calculator and coffee, and a legal pad with columns crossed out and rewritten. If the third property performs even half as well as the first 2, the loan pays for itself in under 4 years. And after that, everything it generates is pure upside, without you touching another dollar of your own. You take the loan. You buy the dry cleaner building. Within 6 months, it's converted, cash only at first, into your third laundromat. That winter, your father, who hasn't said much about any of this since the accident that started it, comes by to look at the newest building before the grand reopening. He walks the floor slowly, one hand on his cane, checking the machines the way he used to check engines, out of habit more than necessity. He doesn't say anything for a long time. Then he tells you the settlement money he never wanted to give you in the first place. The 8 months of paperwork that felt like losing something turned into more than he ever built in 30 years running that shop. He doesn't cry. Neither do you. But something settles between you that dinner never quite managed to. By 35, the 3 locations combined clear just under $13,000 a month. After a part-time manager you finally hired to handle the day-to-day so weekends stop being work. Your teaching salary that year, after 10 years and several small raises, is $71,000. The laundromats now bring in more than your job does, and for the first time, you let yourself imagine an actual date, not a someday, when teaching becomes something you do because you want to, not something you need to. Which brings you back to the parking lot at Whitmore Elementary, cupcakes in hand, watching Brooke's G-Wagon gleam under the morning sun. You think about the $1,240 leaving her account every month for a car that will be worth half of that in 4 years. You think about the $4,300 that landed in yours this month for a building that's worth more than it was last year, and the year before that, and will likely be worth more still the year after you retire from teaching entirely, which you're starting to let yourself imagine might happen sooner than anyone at this school expects. You don't say any of this to Brooke. You just tell her the cupcakes are red velvet, and she says she can't wait to try one. And you walk into the building together like two teachers who make roughly the same salary, because as far as anyone here knows, you do. The Corolla's still got the duct-taped mirror. You've stopped meaning to fix it. It's not that you can't. It's that fixing, it was never really the point. Your mother mentions the laundromats now without lowering her voice, sometimes even to her friends at church, though it took her the better part of 6 years to get there. Your father still stops by the Ferris Street location every couple of months, checks the machines out of habit, and leaves without needing to say why he came. If this story changed how you think about what actually building wealth looks like versus what people assume it looks like, hit like and subscribe for more stories like this one. And I want to know, would you have bought the house in Cedarbrook or the ugly building on Ferris Street? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.